family lives under a bridge, lost everything they owned. Now empty cardboard boxes are what they're calling home. This is where Jesus would go. There's a white-haired widowed lady laying in intensive care. No one goes to see her when she needs some love and prayer. This is where Jesus would go. This is where Jesus would go.
We as believers need to stand up against evil. We can't blame the world for behaving as the world behaves. We can't fault people who are not believers for not recognizing that this is evil and that Jesus Christ is the solution to it, and that He has men and women who He has redeemed, who walk in His righteousness, who have the power and the ability to stand against such evil. We can't fault the world for not being there, because we, the elect, those who have been redeemed by Christ, we are the ones who are connected to the fountain of all power and have the beautiful responsibility of standing against evil. So we can't fault the world for that. We have to first look at ourselves and say, am I, as a believer of Jesus Christ, am I standing up? We can stand against the evil. And we can love the people. You see, we make the mistake sometimes of equating a person's action with the value of a person. And although the action may be a terrible, terrible thing, the person has value. For Jesus died for that person also. He didn't just die for the good people. He didn't just die for the people who have their life together, who never committed some horrible atrocity. He didn't just die for the people who just did a little bit wrong. He died for the worst of the worst. And He died for the best of the best. He died for each and every one of us. Because no matter how good we are, we have no hope of an eternity spent with a holy God without the blood of Christ. And we need to keep that in perspective as we combat evil, remembering that behavior can be evil, but people have value. I talked once of what is the greatest sin? What is the worst sin? What is the unforgivable, unpardonable sin? What sin is too much? What evil is too much? You know, can a man say, well, Hitler just committed, his atrocities were too bad, Stalin's atrocities, they were too bad, Saddam Hussein's atrocities were too bad, Osama bin Laden's atrocities were too bad, they can't be redeemed? That would be a lie. Jesus died for each one of them. You know, but we can say that and we can pay lip service to those words, but do we believe those words? Let's put it in perspective. You have a drug dealer in your community who's been selling drugs to the kids, and the kids have been getting addicted to drugs, starting with maybe a little bit of marijuana, maybe going to some pills, maybe crushing up some pills, maybe then they progress into shooting up with a needle, and next thing you know they're a needle junkie and they have hepatitis, and you know, she's 20 years old, she has hepatitis, can't have children anymore because of some other complications due to the drug abuse. Perhaps she came up as HIV positive, has lost custody of the last 3 children she's had. Perhaps the man she finally decided to marry, or the child, more accurately, that she decided to marry, he's now 24, still has no job, putting in for a disability claim. Doesn't really have a lot wrong with him, except that he weighs probably 90 pounds because he's so withered away and he's scarred from the drugs and the scabs. There was somebody selling him those drugs. Let's say that young person that became the addict and whose life is practically destroyed, they were the one They were the one who was purchasing the drugs from this drug dealer, and this drug dealer gives his life to Christ, and this drug dealer comes into your church and sits in the pew next to you. Can you welcome them as a new creature, as the redeemed of Christ? Can you see that they have value? Christ say, "Little child, I'll save you, but you're going to have to earn your trust. You're going to have to earn the trust from me. I'll make you into a new creature, a new being, but you're going to have to earn your place with me." Or does he welcome us in, providing us with trust up front, celebrating and rejoicing that we have submitted ourselves to his salvation? And if he accepts us and he gives forgiveness to our past sins, and he accepts us and brings us in, knowing that there's going to be baggage that he's going to have to work through with us, because perhaps maybe I have some addiction issues, or perhaps I have some anger issues, or perhaps I have some honesty issues, or some other issues in my life that I have to work through. And yet he accepts me and embraces me with open arms and provides the trust up front. And instead of giving me making me have an opportunity where I have to earn back the trust, he provides me with an opportunity so that I can prove my trustworthiness to him. In effect, what Jesus says is, "Come into my house, child, and here, let me put my wallet here on the table, and as you take your bed tonight, I'm going to leave my wallet on the table, and I'm going to trust, because I believe." The whole world says that you're going to steal that wallet, but I believe you're going to leave that wallet on the table. Isn't that what Jesus does for us? And if he does that for us, why would we go and teach something different to the world, saying, "You know what, I'm going to take my wallet off that table because I don't trust you. I don't care if you've been saved. I don't care if you know Jesus today. I don't trust you." Now, beloved, there's a difference. There's a difference between baiting and tempting somebody to step into sin. When somebody has a weakness in their life, or an addiction, or a problem in their life, you know, if you don't take an alcoholic to the bar and sit down and order a beer next to him and say, "It's not my fault he took a beer." That's not what you do. You don't take a drug addict and sit him down at a drug party and lay out drugs in front of him and expect him to stay clean. You don't take a thief into the vault of the bank and leave the door open and all the money laying unsecured and step out of the room for a few minutes. But don't you think people know our heart? When we celebrate and out of our mouth that they became a believer, we invite them into our home and we lock up all our valuables. Don't you think they notice that? How about the other things that we're quick to pay lip service to and slow to walk out the reality? I watched a young woman who had an abortion long before she met Jesus. But it really doesn't matter when she had the abortion. She had the abortion. Time went by. She met Jesus. She fell in love with Jesus. She gave her life to Christ, and she began to go to church. She joined up in a women's group, meeting some wonderfully godly women who would speak the Word of God into her and teach her. She was looking to these women for leadership, for an example, to be taught how to walk out her life. And as they sat around sharing their testimonies, I'm going to say 90% it was the bulk of these women. They had grown up in church, and they shared their testimony. And there was one or two that came from other walks of life, and they shared their testimony of how they met Jesus and some of who they used to be. And this woman who had this deep, deep burden on her chest that she needed a friend to set it out on. This wasn't somebody who stood up in front of a church without any thought or any forethought and just spilled out their worst sins. But this was a woman who had come to be able to trust this group of women that she sat with, and she just shared how she had an abortion. Now nobody had said anything different. There wasn't one cross word that was spoken in that room. There wasn't one condemning word that was ever said to her. But the people who used to keep a seat open for her no longer kept the seat open for her. Instead of a big hug and a hello, it was more of a half a hug and a good morning. Instead of a warm embrace, it was more like the preacher's hug, you know, just the one arm kind of hug. It wasn't the embrace that she became accustomed to. Subtle little things began to change. And beloved, let me tell you what happened to this young lady as she shared this sin with a group of women who were supposed to be on a common place, supporting one another, for they were a small group who met every week, sharing the Word of God among one another as women. It condemned her, and she in turn began to condemn herself. And she in turn began to doubt the ability of Christ to forgive her sins, because perhaps she committed the sin that couldn't be forgiven.
There's a broken-hearted father suffered his greatest loss as he watched his only son die on an old rugged cross. This is where Jesus would go. This is where Jesus would go.